Okay, settle in, everyone. We are about to take a deep dive into a really specific, fascinating corner of watchmaking history.
And it's one that's, well, totally tied into the world of underwater exploration.
Exactly. And when you think about dive watches, you probably picture a few standard things, right?
Oh, yeah. A beefy case, maybe that unidirectional rotating bezel, for tracking time underwater.
Luminous markers, of course, got to see in the dark. Robust water resistance. These are the classics.
The essential tools divers have relied on for decades, really.
Absolutely. And they've evolved. Sure, you get better materials now, more reliable seals, brighter lume, that sort of thing.
But genuinely game-changing innovations, like undeniable quantum leap moments that really changed what a dive watch
Or
does.
the vital information it gives you right there on your wrist underwater. Those are actually pretty rare in watch history.
Yeah, incremental progress, that's usually the name of the game. Refining things, making them tougher or easier to read.
But a true paradigm shift, that's something else.
It really is.
And that brings us right to our mission today. We got a source here focusing on a watch that, back in 1985, was one of those rare, significant innovations. The original Citizen Aqualand.
Ah, the Aqualand, right. And the source is digging into a brand new timepiece that pays tribute to it.
That's the one, the Citizen Promaster Aqualand 40th Anniversary Limited Edition.
So our goal here is to really unpack why that original Aqualand from, wow, 4 decades ago was such a breakthrough.
Yeah, and then explore how this new anniversary model honors that legacy, apparently with impressive faithfulness, but also brings in modern tech, modern elements.
And ultimately try to understand why this specific watch, both the original and the new one, remains such a, well, the source calls it a cult favorite, why it's still so fascinating.
So if you're ready to plunge into the story of a watch that didn't just tell time, but added this whole other layer of real-time environmental data right there on your wrist.
Then let's do it.
We're taking a deep dive into these sources right now. Okay, so to really get the impact of the original Citizen Aqualand, we need to kind of set the scene. 1985. What was dive tech like then, especially wrist gear?
Right. So imagine you're kitted out for a serious dive, mid-80s. What's on your wrist?
Probably a mechanical watch, right?
Tough one.
Exactly. A robust, purely mechanical dive watch. Its main job, timing. You twist the bezel, mark your start time, track elapsed time.
But depth, how deep you were.
That was totally separate. A dedicated depth gauge, usually another analog instrument.
Yeah, I picture those console gauges or something strapped elsewhere.
Precisely. Clipped to your gear, maybe worn alongside your watch, or on a console with your pressure gauge. Two separate tools for two critical pieces of information. Time here, depth over there.
Sounds like, well, a bit much to manage, maybe.
Yeah.
Especially underwater, maybe gloves on, visibility not great.
It could be, yeah. And that's where Citizen came in with the original Aqualand.
Our source calls the 1985 Aqualand genuinely revolutionary for its time. It wasn't just tweaking things, it added something fundamentally new, integrated.
The electronic depth gauge.
That's the core innovation. Putting an electronic depth gauge into the watch, that was a radical step away from the mechanical-only standard for depth measurement on your wrist.
And the source doesn't mince words, calls it a quantum leap.
Yeah.
Why was that integration, putting the depth sensor in the watch, such a huge deal for divers?
Look, this was the real game changer. Before Aqualand, your watch told you time, maybe elapsed time. That's it.
Right.
The Aqualand fundamentally changed what a dive watch was. It put life-critical environmental data, your actual depth, right now, measured electronically, shown digitally onto the same tool you used for timing.
Okay, I see. One device, two key data points.
Exactly. That shift from just timing to integrating real-time depth, it wasn't just convenient, it changed how a diver could monitor their situation, just one glance, time and depth. The source says it provided vital information to divers directly on the wrist in a way that just wasn't common before.
That integration, yeah, sounds incredibly powerful for just knowing what's going on underwater. And the source makes another big claim. It paved the way for the modern dive computer.
That's a significant claim, but you can see the logic. Think about modern dive computers. They grab multiple data points, depth, time, maybe temperature, gas mix.
And crunch them to give you decompression info, ascent rates.
Right, all that complex processing. The original Aqualand, by successfully putting electronic depth measurement alongside timekeeping on the wrist, was a huge early step. It showed the potential for wrist electronics to handle and display complex real-time dive data.
It proved the concept.
It proved the concept that a single wrist device could handle multiple critical dive parameters electronically. Now, it wasn't a full computer, not by a long shot, but it planted the seed. The idea that this could be done on your wrist grew from there.
And what's really amazing, according to our source, is that even now, 40 years later, this specific combo, a tough watch that also has a reliable electronic depth gauge, remains virtually unmatched as a watch.
That's a really important distinction. Look, dedicated dive computers, they're everywhere now. Super sophisticated. They're the main tool for loads of divers.
Sure.
But if you want a robust, traditional watch, first and foremost, something that tells time reliably, looks like a watch, feels like a watch, but also gives you that integrated electronic depth reading without being a full-on computer with menus and complex interfaces.
The Aqualand still stands out.
Our source suggests it carved out this specific niche and kind of still defines it. Its form factor, that integrated function. It's pretty unique. It's a tool watch with a very specific, very powerful electronic capability that, few others have really replicated in quite the same way with the same iconic status.
So that blend, groundbreaking tech for its time, really practical, plus that distinctive, purely functional look that probably explains why it became, as the source says, an enduring favorite and a cult favorite.
Absolutely. It wasn't just another diver. It was the watch with the built-in digital depth meter. It had an identity, visually and functionally, that just set it apart.
It offered something genuinely different, something useful.
Mm-hmm. And while, our source points out it didn't totally reshape the whole watch industry, you weren't seeing depth meters on dress watches all of a sudden.
Right. Thankfully, maybe.
Yeah. But within the world of serious dive watches for pros and enthusiasts, it was undeniably a major technological step forward. It wasn't just tweaking the formula, it was like a new species of dive watch, integrating electronics for real utility.
Merging functions that used to be separate analog tools.
Oh.
So the big question now, with that kind of legacy, a watch that was a quantum leap, how does this new 40th anniversary model handle that? How do you update something so distinctive without, losing what made it special?
And that's where this new release comes in. Our source frames it nicely, calls it a new commemorative version, an ultra-capable love letter to the brand's diving heritage.
A love letter. I like that.
Yeah.
Designed to evoke the original, but with modern updates. And this love letter, well, it arrives to some pretty eye-popping specs. Our source flags the case dimensions right away. 50.7 millimeters wide, 14.8 millimeter thick. That sounds huge.
It really does. You see those numbers, you immediately think dinner plate, right? And for most watches, those dimensions would be massive, maybe totally unwieldy.
But. There's a but.
There's a but. Our source is quick to add crucial context, saying these numbers are likely to be deceptive.
Okay, deceptive how? What makes these big numbers potentially misleading?
It all comes down to the watch's signature feature, the thing that made the original a quantum leap.
The electronic depth sensor.
Exactly. Just like the 85 original, the sensor is a physically prominent part of the watch. On this new one, it's at 9 o'clock. And crucially, it significantly contributes to the width.
Ah, okay. So a good chunk of that 50.7 millimeter isn't the main round case body, it's the sensor unit sticking out the side.
Precisely. The source describes it vividly. Extended out from the case side on a broad flange, and it's topped with this striking vented gold tone cap. It's not subtle, it's a substantial piece of kit fundamental to the watch's function and its iconic asymmetrical look.
And it's that asymmetry, that sensor housing, that gives it the look the source calls an asymmetrical, arguably ungainly utilitarian silhouette.
Ungainly might sound negative, but honestly, in the context of a pure tool watch, it often just means form is ruthlessly following function.
Yeah, it's not trying to be pretty, it's trying to do something.
Exactly. That bulge on the side isn't a style choice. It's because you need to house the sensing equipment effectively. The design comes purely from the tech requirements and the diving environment. And that function-first look is a huge part of the Aqualand's unique appeal.
Our source gives a helpful comparison, too, mentioning that similar vintage Citizen divers, without the sensor bulge, were still pretty big at 44 millimeter wide.
Right, so the base watch is already a solid tool watch size, but it's the sensor that pushes the total footprint into that 50 millimeter plus territory.
Okay, that makes more sense. What about the case material itself?
The source says it's deep gray, matte-blasted stainless steel.
Matte blasted, so not shiny. Very tool-like.
Definitely. And linking back to the history, it has those yellow gold tone accents. And the source emphasizes this two-tone look isn't just a modern retro thing. It faithfully harkens back to the very first Aqualand.
So that's a deliberate historical nod.
Absolutely. Key for a tribute piece. They're not just copying the shape, they're hitting those signature visual cues, including that distinctive two-tone that was part of the original's identity. It screams heritage.
Beyond the sensor and the colors, what other classic Citizen tool diver features does the source mention? Things built for toughness.
Well, it points out the heavy flares extend past the rounded case sides to protect the pushers and 4 o'clock crown.
Ah, those protective shoulders.
Pure utility. Pushers and crowns, they're potential weak spots for water ingress or just getting banged up or snagged on gear. Those flares aren't just styling, they're shields, a hallmark of a serious tool watch.
Makes sense. And the bezel. Gotta be functional.
Oh yeah. The source describes a knurled gold tone bezel. Knurling means good grip. Essential if you're wearing thick neoprene gloves underwater.
Right. Need to be able to turn it easily.
And it has an ultra-legible, full-scale dive insert. Full scale means minute markers all the way around, not just the first 15 or 20 minutes. Allows for precise timing, like for deco stops. Legibility and usability in tough conditions are paramount.
And the case back.
Noted as a simple, laser-engraved, screw-down caseback.
Take forward. Screw down for water resistance.
Standard practice for a proper dive watch. The laser engraving probably adds the 40th anniversary commemoration.
And the all-important water resistance rating.
Confirmed at a dive-ready 200 meters. So suitable for standard recreational diving, which fits its role as a capable underwater tool.
Okay, so looking at the case, it's clear they've really leaned into recreating that radical function-first shape of the original, including that massive sensor housing.
But using modern techniques. Tough materials like that matte steel, and nailing the historical details like the two-tone and those protective flares.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? Preserving the unique, maybe slightly odd look that defined the original as a tool, but building it with today's quality standards.
Exactly. It's about respecting the function-driven design while ensuring it meets modern expectations for durability and finish.
Okay, let's move inward from that very distinct case. The face of the watch, the dial. Source says, like the case, it's a faithfully executed 80s throwback.
And specifically calls out the Anadigi dial.
Anadigi, analog hands plus a digital display.
Yep, classic 80s vibe, especially for watches integrating new electronic tech back then. It visually embodies that mix of traditional watchmaking and the new digital world. The source mentions the main analog part has a black sunburst finish, but the real priority is legibility. Calls it ultra-legible and chunky.
How do they get that legibility, especially down where it's dark?
Key elements. Broad, generously lume-filled printed wedge indices. Big, simple shapes packed with luminous material, easy to read quickly, even in murky water.
And the hands.
Described as Citizen's familiar cathedral and arrow diver handset. Another nod to their heritage dive watches, also filled with plenty of lume.
And there's a specific color touch for readability too, right?
There is. The source notes an orange minute hand.
Ah, classic diver feature.
Super practical. The minute hand is arguably the most crucial one during a timed dive, referencing it against the bezel constantly. Making it pop with a high contrast color like orange means you spot it instantly, track it easily, minimizes errors underwater.
So the analog parts keep it grounded as a watch, but the source says the natural center of attention, both visually and functionally, is that 12 o'clock digital subdial.
Right. This is where you see the watch's core tech innovation at work. This digital display does double duty. It's a 1100-second chronograph for precise timing. And more importantly, it's the line's defining digital depth gauge. This is where you see the real-time depth readings coming from that sensor on the side of the case.
So that little screen isn't just for show, it's the readout for the watch's most distinctive function.
Exactly. And the source notes the aesthetic side. Yeah, it amplifies the throwback feel, but emphasizes it's also the window to the watch's most distinctive, impressive functionality. The retro digital look is cool, sure, but its primary purpose is pure function.
Okay, let's talk about the engine driving all this. What movement is running this blend of retro looks and modern function?
Citizen's using their own in-house Cal.C520 quartz movement. It's a modern quartz caliber purpose-built to replicate those core Aqualand functions reliably, and maybe add a few things.
And the source lists the complications it handles.
Yeah, the basics you'd expect. The chronograph, a calendar, a programmable alarm, and of course the main event, the depth gauge.
So, a pretty feature-packed quartz movement for diving. But the source flags one extra feature from this movement as being particularly important, especially for serious divers.
Yes, and this is where the modern version really adds something significant based on current safety understanding. The source identifies one more crucial tool for serious divers: the ascent rate alarm.
Ascent rate alarm, let's unpack that. The source says its purpose is to avoid the painful and potentially deadly bends. Can you elaborate, just based on the source's implication, what are the bends and how does this alarm help?
Okay, so the bends, or decompression sickness, DCS, it's a major diving risk. Basically, under pressure deep down, your body absorbs nitrogen gas into its tissues if you come up too
The
fast.
pressure drops too quickly.
Right, and that dissolved nitrogen can come out of solution too fast, forming tiny bubbles in your blood and tissues. That's bad news. It can cause pain, joint issues, nerve damage, even be fatal.
Nasty stuff.
Very. So the source implies this ascent rate alarm in the CalDOT C520 movement actually monitors how fast you're swimming upwards towards the surface. If your speed goes over the safe, recommended limits designed to let that nitrogen off gas safely.
The watch warns you.
Exactly. It gives you an alert, tells you, hey, slow down. It's an active, real-time warning against making a critical, potentially dangerous mistake during your ascent.
Wow. So it's not just showing you data like depth, it's actively monitoring a safety parameter and giving you feedback. That feels like a big upgrade.
It is, and our source calls this a genuinely brilliant